evening, everyone. Sawadee krap tukhan. Welcome, everyone, to Macquarie University. I have already introduced myself, but for those of you who came in a little bit later, my name is Dr. Thomas Svetanant, and I am a colleague of Dr. Chavalin Svetanant here in the Department of Media Communications, Creative Arts, Languages and Literature.
Sorry, hi everyone, my name is Bass. I'm just going to be Tom Thai version. สวัสดีครับแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านนะครับก็มีคุณทอมนะครับที่จะดำเนินรายการวันนี้นะครับแล้วก็เดี๋ยวผมจะมีแวบๆเข้ามาผมชื่อเบสนะครับก็รู้จักเมื่อกี้คุณทอมก็ได้แนะนำตัวเรานิดหนึ่งนะครับคุณทอมเป็นด็อกเตอร์นะครับทอมก็เป็นเพื่อนร่วมงานกับอาจารย์โดนะครับก็จะได้มาดำเนินรายการให้ทุกคนได้ทราบกันวันนี้ครับผม
Okay, I've been given my marching orders. So, before the formal event begins, I've been tasked with giving a number of housekeeping instructions. So, first of all, I'd once again like to welcome you all. Thank you very much for coming to this very important event. As you are well aware, our guests are quite interesting people, but also people who we need to treat with a lot of sensitivity and a lot of respect. And the housekeeping that I'm going to go over with you tonight will be related to some of these issues of sensitivity and privacy, most importantly.
ก็วันนี้นะครับแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านครับเราจะมีการดำเนินรายการเหมือนปกตินะครับก็อยากจะยินดีต้อนรับทุกท่านก่อนนะครับมาที่งานที่นี่นะครับผมวันนี้เนี่ยเราจะมีกฎที่เป็น housekeeping อยู่ไม่กี่ข้อนะครับก็จะเป็นกฎที่เกี่ยวกับการ privacy แล้วก็ safety ของงานวันนี้ด้วยนะครับ
Okay, so first and foremost, I'd like to remind you of what I spoke about earlier, which is we would like to remind everyone to refrain from utilizing audio-visual recording and also other forms of recording. We would encourage you to not use your phones. The security team would especially appreciate if you didn't turn your phones on. However, there are going to be QR codes. So of course, if you want to take photos and use those QR codes, that's fine. But if we do see people recording, we will ask you to leave the venue.
ก็กฎข้อแรกนะครับก็อย่างที่ทราบกันไปแล้วนะครับที่คุณทอมได้กล่าวไปแล้วนะครับก็คือรบกวนไม่ใช้โทรศัพท์มือถือนะครับเพื่ออัดวิดีโอภาพหรือว่าเสียงไม่ว่าด้วยกรณีใดๆก็ตามนะครับถ้าเกิดมีการฝ่าฝืนเนี่ยอาจจะต้องมีทีม security ที่เข้ามาดูแลตรงนี้นะครับก็อันนี้เป็นเพื่อความปลอดภัยแล้วก็ความเป็นส่วนตัวของแขกรับเชิญแล้วก็ของคุณปวีด้วยครับ
One other piece of important housekeeping is once the event formally begins, at the end of this housekeeping introduction, we would like to encourage people to remain seated for as long as possible. Of course, if you need to go to the bathroom, you can, and for your reference, the bathroom is just outside to the left, and you go straight forward and you'll find them on your left.
อีกเรื่องนึงนะครับก็คือถ้าเมื่องานเริ่มแล้วนะครับก็ขอความกรุณาให้นั่งอยู่กับที่นะครับถ้าอยากจะลุกเพื่อไปห้องน้ำเนี่ยก็สามารถทำได้นะครับแต่ว่าพยายามไม่ยืนนะครับให้นั่งอยู่กับที่แล้วถ้าจะลุกไปห้องน้ำเนี่ยห้องน้ำจะอยู่ข้างนอกนะครับจะมีโซนที่เป็นสีส้มอยู่ตรงนี้เนี่ยก็เดินตรงไปเข้าห้องน้ำได้เลยครับ
Okay, and then one last thing. I'm sure you've noticed this slideshow behind us. And we would encourage everyone to really considering what the topic of tonight's event is and what we're going to be talking about, human trafficking, human rights, and particularly these issues within the context of Southeast Asia. We would like to encourage everyone to consider donating to the Blue Heart campaign, which is a charitable organization which supports victims of human trafficking. If you would like to make a donation to this campaign, you may scan this QR code. Now it's safe to use your phones. And you can make a donation. I would also add that we will make this QR code and this information available to you again at the end of tonight. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
ผมให้คุณทอมก็จะมี QR code นะครับอยู่ข้างบนนะครับ เป็น Blue Heart Campaign ที่ช่วยเหลือเหยื่อของการค้ามนุษย์นะครับก็คุณปวีณเนี่ยไม่รับการระดมทุนอะไรทั้งสิ้นส่วนตัวทั้งสิ้นนะครับก็คือถ้าสมมติอยากช่วยเหลือคอสตรงนี้เนี่ย welcome back อยากช่วยเหลือคอสตรงนี้เนี่ยก็สามารถสแกน QR code ได้เลยนะครับตอนนี้ใช้มือถือได้นะครับอันนี้ก็เป็นเรื่องที่เราพยายามผลักดันนะครับตรงนี้ก็ถ้าอยากช่วยเหลืออยากจะบริจาคก็สามารถสแกน QR ได้เลยครับ
So my Commander-in-Chief Chavalin has reminded me, I forgot to say one thing, which is to note, as I'm sure many of you have noticed, we do have people in the room formally filming this event, and if you do not consent to have your image or your voice captured at this event, please do let a member of the organisation team know. You'll recognise us from the colour of our what are these things called? Armbands. We have gold or black, and we will endeavour to ensure that you are not filmed. Consent. Though we would note that there is information about this on the walls, and we assume consent if you are present. There we go. Now I'm done. Jump out. อีกเรื่องที่สำคัญนะครับก็เราจะมีการถ่ายรูปกับเก็บภาพนะครับโดยช่างกล้องแล้วก็ทีมงานนะครับมีทั้งภาพเสียงแล้วก็วิดีโอเลยนะครับถ้าสมมติไม่อยากให้อนุญาตที่จะปรากฏตัวในสื่อหรือว่าในวิดีโอหรือภาพเนี่ยก็สามารถบอกพวกเราได้นะครับจะมีสตาฟที่ใส่สีนี้อยู่นะครับเพื่อขอ wristband อีกอันหนึ่งที่เป็นสีเขียวนะครับแล้วทีมงานช่างภาพช่างวิดีโอเนี่ยก็จะทราบว่าถ้ามีคนที่ใส่สีเขียวเนี่ยก็จะไปเก็บรูปไปเก็บวิดีโอไปเก็บภาพไปเก็บเสียงนะครับหรือสามารถไปขอได้ที่ข้างหน้าได้เลยนะครับถ้ามาที่นี่แล้วก็คือถือว่าถ้าไม่มีเนี่ยถือว่าอนุญาตนะครับผมก็ขอบคุณมากครับสำหรับวันนี้ครับ enjoy ครับ
Good morning, sorry, good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chavalin Svetanant, and I'm senior lecturer in the Department of Media and Communication, Creative Arts, Language and Literature, Faculty of Arts, Macquarie University. I'll be your host for this evening and not in the morning, sorry. I would like to start the event with a welcome to country video performed by a local Darak elder, Auntie Julie Jansen. It welcomes all visitors of the university to the local land belong to the mathematical people of the Darak nation whose culture and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land.
Welcome. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of Macquarie University land, the Warramargal clan of the Darak Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured this land since the Dreamtime. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future. We welcome people of all nations and all faiths. Kwai Bidja, Jamna Payala Janawi. Come here, we speak together. We have 60,000 years of archaeological evidence of Aboriginal habitation at Lake Mungo and 20,000 years in Ryde. We have great antiquity. Today, hundreds of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people graduate from Macquarie University. The Darak Nation had famous leaders such as Chief Yarramundi, Naraginji, Colby and Maria Locke. Many of the descendants of these Darak people live today amongst you. We celebrate with you our ongoing attachment and custodianship of this country. We celebrate the achievements of Macquarie University.
Thank you, Auntie Julie, for welcoming us to country. I would also like to acknowledge the Walumataka clan of the Darak Nation, the traditional custodians of the country on which we are gathered today. We are excited to see all of you tonight. Thank you for making time to join us in this important event. We would like to extend a special welcome to our guest of honor, Mr. Paween Pongsirin, who traveled a long way from Melbourne to be here with us tonight. We would also like to welcome the two speakers, Mr. Mohammad Raf and Professor Catherine Renshaw, who will join us later for a discussion panel. We would also like to say welcome to the Thai community, Swawadika, and the Rohingya community for your support for the event. The documentary screening of Thailand's Fearless Cop is organized in anticipation of the World Day Against Trafficking in person on this coming Saturday, 30th July. Our primary aim in organizing this documentary screening was to raise awareness of the plight of Rohingya refugees in Southeast Asia who face the threat of human trafficking on a daily basis. The event will also explore rights to freedom of speech and how whistleblowers and activists shape discourses surrounding human trafficking within contexts where media and other forms of communication face censorship. We could not have organized this event without the generous support of 101 East, Al Jazeera, as well as Dr. M. Sin Peng from the University of Sydney. The program will start with opening remarks from the award-winning journalist and our dear colleague, Professor Peter Greste. After that, Mr. Paween Pongsirin will provide an introduction to the documentary, followed by the documentary screening. At the end, Mr. Paween will be joined in conversation by Mr. Mohammad Raf from the Arakan Rohingya Development Association Australia, or ARDA Australia, and Professor Catherine Renshaw from the Western Sydney University for a roundtable to discuss about the ongoing challenges facing Rohingya within a variety of authoritarian contexts across Southeast Asia. Just a few housekeeping notes to remind you before we start. You might have seen the notice of filming and photography around the theater. This is to remind you that you enter an area where photography, audio, and video recording may occur. By entering this event premises, you consent to such recording and to its release, publication, exhibition, or reproduction. If you would prefer not to be included, please avoid cameras and notify an organizer. We would also appreciate your cooperation in refraining from using your mobile phones during the event. This includes taking audio, visual recordings, and photography. Now, let me virtually welcome Professor Peter Greste, the award-winning journalist, author, and professor of journalism at Macquarie University, who will kick off the event with some opening remarks.
When Chavalin invited me to make the introductory remarks to this evening's event, I must admit I was a little puzzled. You see, I'm not an expert in Thailand or the Rohingya, and I've spent very little of my professional career in Asia, so I'm really not that familiar with the politics of the region. But when I heard more and previewed the film you're about to see, it raised a few key issues that really resonated very powerfully with me. Firstly, Pol Major General Paween Pongsirin, the former police officer at the centre of the film and someone who you will meet shortly, really is a remarkable man with extraordinary integrity, and he deserves all the support and recognition that we can give him. That's partly to recognise his personal sacrifices, but also to amplify the issues he tried to address, and in the process make it that much harder for the powerful people he exposed to strike back at him or his family. Now, as you watch the film, I'd like you to really reflect on those sacrifices, to think about the impact of his work as an investigator on both himself and his family. Reflect too on the courage it takes to stand up to the corrupt forces within Thailand, and the still greater courage it takes to go public with a documentary like this one. In journalism, we often argue that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I suspect Paween would agree with that. Now, that doesn't mean it's perfect, but it is far harder for powerful and corrupt people like the politicians, the businessmen, and the military officers he exposed to continue operating if we all know what they've been up to. It's also worth pointing out that Paween recognises the value of a free media. By talking to Al Jazeera, he's working with journalists to expose the problems and to amplify them, not for his own benefit, but for the benefit of his entire country. Now, in arguing for media freedom and freedom of speech around the world, I'm often accused of trying to push a Western imperialist idea of democracy onto non-Western cultures. We sometimes hear it as contrary to Asian values or African values, as if openness, transparency and accountability are not universal values. And in my view, there is not a single system of government or culture that can't benefit from the kind of transparency and accountability that you will see so powerfully on display in this documentary. I also want to take a moment to reflect on these issues in the context of our own country. It's easy for us to look down on Thailand with patronising eyes and see it as a problem that we don't have to worry about. After all, we don't have people smugglers, certainly not amongst our senior political and police classes at least. Our culture is much better at managing things like corruption, and our media is far freer than Thailand's. But to assume that we don't have these problems at all would be hubris. Corruption, human trafficking, violence and organised crime are not Thai problems alone. They are human problems. And as Australians, we are every bit as vulnerable as any other society. Yes, our system of justice and rule of law is more effective, and it would be naive in the extreme, though, to assume we've got no cause for concern or that these things only happen in other countries. They can and they have happened here, and we need to keep our systems of accountability robust and strong. Human rights abuses occur here routinely. Corruption and abuses of power happen, and our media isn't as free as we'd like to believe. National security laws have consistently eroded the ability of journalists to hold the government and its agencies to account. Australian journalists are increasingly worried about the risks of diving into the depths of government, and sources, our own versions of Paween, are becoming increasingly scared about the consequences of speaking up. Just look at the nightmare that people like Bernard Collaery, Witness K and Richard Boyle have gone through. So as you watch this video, I urge you to reflect on the way that these issues can and sometimes do affect our own country. Finally, let me congratulate Chavalin, Tom and their academic colleagues for putting on this really important event. Academia has a vital role to play in these issues, and the work of academics has to be evidence-based, of course, and as far as possible it should also be apolitical. But it must never use those issues as an excuse to avoid engaging in an important and challenging issue like this one. So thanks for being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Peter. Next, we have a privilege to be joined by the former Police Major General Paween Pongsirin, the focus of the feature documentary. Paween excelled in his work and rose quickly through the ranks to become a Top Gun investigator. Through the course of his work, Paween uncovered a number of high-ranking and local state officials allegedly involved in Thailand's largest human trafficking case in the history. He is now living in exile in Australia, and he has an important story to tell us. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Paween Pongsirin.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I am grateful for the opportunity to share my story. In my experience, working in government service as a police officer in Thailand for 33 years, I have faced many terrible situations, from brutal homicide cases to complicated cases, and even the murder of a whole family. In each case, there was a different method of killing, from using gun, using a knife, to hanging, drowning, or even hiring a hitman. or a member of the mafia. All of them made me feel sick to my bones every time I had to inspect the crime scene. I have also worked on a plane crash case where many people lost their lives. One particular event that I will remember for the rest of my life is from 2004, a powerful undersea earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra Island in Indonesia and sets off the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami that consumed over 200,000 lives. I was in Phuket, in the south of Thailand. When it happened, I saw so many human bodies all at once. I attended a meeting in Khao Lak, located in the Guapa, Phang province, which is about 2 hours away from Phuket. The purpose of the meeting was to set out a plan to identifying the bodies so we can look for their families and return them to their loved ones. It was difficult work, especially in such a sorrowful time. The smell of human remains filled up the air of the entire city, and it felt like the smell never left me. The ruins of people's homes, buildings, and cars could be seen around the city. The scene was so depressing and heartbreaking. Some of these events were caused by the desire to take someone's life or conflict of interest. Some were caused by human negligence, and some were just natural disasters. In the end, all of them bore people's hearts. All of those stories still cannot compare to the story that I am about to present to you here. It is one of the most horrendous things ever done to humans in Southeast Asia. The case was not like any other case that I was involved in before. Apart from facing the inhumanity of this trafficking network that treated their victims with nothing but brutality, this was the case that changed my life. This case was a perfect proof that Thailand, the country that I was born and raised in and where I lived until I reached old age, has a distorted system that they are trying to hide from the world. When it was revealed, everyone was shocked. Even people from the same country were shocked and surprised and made many questions. If Thailand has a normal system like other developed countries like Australia, I would not be standing in front of you here. I would have been spending my retirement with my family. Why am I here in this country? Everyone will got to know a part of the story from the documentary that will be shown tonight. Everything in this documentary from Al Jazeera is genuine, but with many limitations. They could not tell everything that happened. Many important details were left out because it might not be able to be aired in Thailand. Some of you might have questions after watching this documentary. I am here to give you the truth and clarify any doubts that you may have. Everyone will get to witness the brutality within the Thai bureaucracy that facilitated the emergence of the human trafficking network and the long existence for many years. I have seen the network that work together for many countries, including Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, and Malaysia. The tasks were dedicated. The first part was sourcing the Rohingyas. Many of them were recruited at their own will. Some of them were taken into it. Some of them were captured. All of them were put on modified fishing vessels, which could carry up to 500 people on board. There were people who carried weapons to control these people. The Rohingyas were fed only 2 handfuls of rice, 2 chili, and a small amount of water. If anyone asked for more, they would be assaulted. The trafficking victims had to stay on the boat for 15 days. Those who got sick or tried to fight would get shot and thrown into the sea. When they arrived in Thai waters, area under the authority of the Royal Thai Navy, the Rohingya landed and transported to their accommodation in the forest in provinces of Phang, Ranong, and Stul. They would then be transported to Padang Besa in Songkhla province. Often they died during this trip to Padang Besa from a lack of oxygen, as many of them were squashed into a cat truck. The transportation had to go through many checkpoints until they reached the camp in the middle of the forest in Padang Besa near the border with Malaysia. There were more than 26 camps found. Each camp could hold hundreds of Rohingyas. The conditions of the camps indicated that they were there for several years. Though these camps were in the middle of a forest on a mountain, they were not that far from the Songkhla Provincial Hall, which is the governor's office. The governor has the authority to oversee the governance of the province. They were there far from Provincial Police Region 9 office or Naval Area Command 2 office in Boyang, Songkhla province. They are even closer to Svetanant camp, which is a big army camp in Hat Yai district of Songkhla province. There are other governmental departments that have eyes and ears everywhere. From government officer, like district chief, sub-district headman, village headman, to other police forces, like border patrol police and highway police and many more. How did they let the human trafficking network survive for so many years? How did the network stay under the radar of those in power in the area? There is only one simple explanation to these questions. It is money. From the beginning to the end, dirty money was paid to let this network survive. The more powerful the position someone held, the more money they got. The evidence was the financial transactions that were found and the money laundering cases. People in this network didn't care about the suffering and the loss of Rohingyas. Many of them were left with disability, deep in famine, and became sick. People in this network even got the Rohingya to phone their family and beat them up so their screams of pain can be heard by their families at the other end of the phone call. They need to get some money. It is the kind of ruthlessness that people can do to one another. I work with almost 100 police officers on this investigation. The whole time I was stuck from getting the information. I was asked to stop the investigation. I was even asked to help a lieutenant general who was arrested in this case. In the end, the higher-ups transferred me to dangerous area where they could easily get rid of me any minute. The final goal was when I was offered work attached to the palace in the capital. I chose to keep my life so that one day I could tell this story to the world. I want everyone to know what I have experienced, and that day had arrived after my long wait of 6 years and 7 months. I would like to thank every person and every organization behind my asylum. Some I can mention their names, and some I cannot. I thank all of those who handed me help and moral support by sending me good wishes and empowered me. I would like to thank Future Forward Party and Mr. Pakorn Udom-Vivasakul, who took my story to the Parliament meeting on the 27th of February 2020. Mr. Thanathorn Jingrunglungkit and Ms. Panika Wani from the same party contacted me to get the information. I would like to again thank Ms. Panika Wani and Mr. Langsiman Lom from the Move Forward Party who brought up this human trafficking case to the Parliament discussion again on the 18th of February 2022 and invited me to join a video conference on the 19th of February 2022. I thank the people of Australia who welcomed me to their country, and thank the Australian government who gave me the right to stay in the country and provide me with safe accommodation. I have the chance to learn the language and culture and have access to medical care. I thank the Refugee and Immigration Legal Center Incorporated that helps me from the start in this country. I thank technical and further education hotel and all the teachers at Lilydale campus, including Jackie Sprinkle, Mary Jo Martin, and Michelle Waters. And thanks my Australian friends, Noel Donahue and New Grove Baptist Church. I would like to also thank Mark Lambert, Winston Evan, Christian James from Wolverton Seventh-day Adventist Church. I thank Amos Lucas, David Boy, Adam, and Kay for composing the documentary that beautifully documented my story and made a good impression in everyone's hearts. I thank every media from every channel that I cannot mention them all for presenting my story to the world. I would like to thank Macquarie University, the University of Sydney, and every lecturer who helped make today happen, especially the dedications of Dr. Chavalin, Svetanant, Dr. M. Sinpeng, and their team. I feel very inspired and empowered. Lastly, I would like to thank everyone who came today and follow my story for your interest in helping our humankind friends together. I am really thankful for today from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Paween, for the inspiring story. Now it's time to watch the documentary Thailand's Fearless Cop, produced by 101 East Al Jazeera together. The documentary will last about 45 minutes. This will be followed by the roundtable discussion. Please kindly note that the content that you are about to see contains images that may be disturbing to some viewers. We hope you enjoy the documentary. Now, let's move to the roundtable discussion. First, I would like to introduce the chair, Dr. Roger Lee Huang from the Department of Security Studies and Criminology, Macquarie University. Dr. Huang will be in conversation with the three speakers, including Mr. Paween Pongsirin. Mr. Mohammad Raf, Mr. Mohammad Raf is the co-founder and the director of the Arakan Rohingya Development Association Australia, or ARDA Australia. And the last one, Professor Catherine Renshaw. Professor Renshaw is in the School of Law at the Western Sydney University. She is a leading expert in human rights and democracy in Southeast Asia. She was also the Labour candidate for North Sydney in the recent federal election. Before we begin, we would like to remind you to please refrain from photography and audio-video recording and to remain in your seats during the portion of the event. We will have a roaming microphone available for question and answer sessions with the audience at the end of the formal discussion. Over to you, Roger.
Thanks, Chavalin. Welcome everyone to today's discussion. I know we're running a little bit late. I'm just going to start with a couple of round questions to our distinguished panelists here today, and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. So during the Q&A, we might be filming or taking photos. If you don't want to be filmed or taking photos for any reason, please let us know when you ask a question. And for those in the audience who would like to ask a question in Thai, we do have an interpreter here helping with that as well. So if anyone wants to ask questions later again in Thai, feel free to do so. I think we'll probably start with Catherine, Professor Renshaw, who has expertise in kind of international law, especially in Southeast Asian context. Now, could you just give us a broad context of what the human rights and human trafficking environment is in Southeast Asia, and in particular, perhaps also a little bit about the context of the Rohingya and why they are fleeing Myanmar?
Thanks, Roger. Thank you very much to Macquarie University and to the Sydney Southeast Asia Centre. It's an honour to be here with Paween tonight. So globally, Southeast Asia is known as a hub for human trafficking. Human trafficking is prevalent across Southeast Asia. Countries like Thailand are countries that receive victims of human trafficking, and also countries that send victims to other countries that are wealthier in Southeast Asia, like Malaysia, and further abroad as well, to the United States, to Australia. So the Indo-Pacific and the Mekong area, which includes China and countries like Australia and New Zealand, has got particular flows of human trafficking. We know that countries like Myanmar, that are riven with conflict and instability, are fertile ground for human traffickers. So places that have a lot of poverty, places where there's conflict, and more we're seeing places where we've seen natural disasters from climate change, are all places where human traffickers find their victims. And some things are clear about trafficking. One of them is that the suffering of the victims of human trafficking is extreme. So subjected to torture, to rape, to abuse, to loss of their liberty. And the other thing we know is that in places where the rule of law is under strain, so in countries where there are high levels of corruption, like unfortunately Thailand, like Myanmar, then that's also the condition where human trafficking flourishes as well. The efforts to combat human trafficking are through the UN. There's a global convention against organised crime, the sort of crime that we saw described in the video just then. And there's a protocol, a trafficking protocol specifically designed to help countries address the problem of human trafficking. All of the countries of Southeast Asia have signed up to this global convention. The United States has got a very big interest in preventing trafficking, and every year they publish how well different countries are doing in addressing trafficking. In Southeast Asia, only 2 countries are ranked by the United States as being the best, as doing what they should to address human trafficking. They're the Philippines, interestingly, and also Singapore. Most of the other countries are ranked in the 2nd group or even the 3rd, like Myanmar. So it is a problem, and efforts to address it have not been successful. And I think the reasons for that are the ones that we saw in the video that we all just watched. It's endemic corruption and the kinds of conditions that will make people always be vulnerable to human trafficking.
Thanks for that. I'll also just draw your attention that this Saturday, July 30th, is the World Day Against Human Trafficking. And we've got a QR code and a campaign here, so we welcome anyone to help donate to the cause to really kind of address this serious issue. Now I want to turn to Mohammed. Could you tell us a little bit about your association, the Arakan Rohingya Development Association, and broadly about the Rohingya community here in Australia? As we know, human trafficking isn't just limited to the Rohingya community, but certainly the Rohingya community has been one of the worst affected in the global context.
Thank you very much. First of all, I do appreciate for all attendees coming here, and also I do appreciate the Macquarie University and Sydney University making this panel program. I'm a Rohingya in front of you, like you, a human being. Nothing different with you and me. It might be skin and color or religion, because whatever you have seen in the picture is really terrible, but what I can say, it might be 5% of Rohingya people are suffering what you have seen in this video. 95% of the situation for they are really suffering in the country is terrible. It's terrible. We all are human beings. We all have respect to each other's. Ethnicity, religion, doesn't matter. Let me give you an example. If you visit a garden must have different kind of flowers, different kind of what's called colors, that you can see it is a garden. If there is a flower with a color, only a kind of flower, I think no one will love it. So, any country, even in Burma, sorry to say, I can't say Myanmar, because it is very politicized, using this word. Because since the Burmese military coup came, they changed city name, they changed norms, okay? They changed many things. They change policy time to time, because each and every policy failing to them. So surprisingly, they can't say our name as Rohingya till today. No one can believe it. It is not shame for us to call myself, I'm a Rohingya. But I don't know why Burmese government, they shy or they don't like to call us Rohingya. It's very terrible. It's not accepted. And the question, the trafficking, because if you can't speak your language, if you can't live in your culture, if you can't show your willingness, if you can't go to the school, if you can't visit one village to another, to the city for the treatment, joining to the government, joining with the university and college, is very terrible. Okay? So, even they can't earn for their living. If a person, he can't study, he can't get treatment, okay, he can't get support, he can't get right, nothing from the government. So end of the day, they have to leave. They have to leave their country. So in this way, our people are living in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. My estimation, 1.4 million. Okay? So the same coming to Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, again also in India. The question is, why they need to leave the country, since why they have their the village, the home? Because the Burmese government bulldoze their home, burn everything for what they can. They use Rakhine ethnics, okay, to get a favor. Sometimes they fight each other, okay. But end of the day, majority of our people already left our state. That is called Arakan state. So somehow you may be surprised why I'm calling Arakan state. This is not actually Rakhine state. Sorry for that. Because Arakan, if you see the world map, you will see the Arakan very clearly. Arakan is the Arabic word. Arakan is our land. They are our brothers and sisters. Rakhine, they are our brothers and sisters. Today, Burmese military, they brainwash Rakhine that we are not brothers and sisters of Rakhine. This is the Burmese government twisting between the ethnics. We are not only refugees, for your information. There are many ethnics, many different believers, okay? Muslim believers, Buddhist believers, Christian believers, okay, angel believers. There are many different. I think registered now at present government, they registered ethnicity about, I think, 134. It's not only 134. Since Burmese General Ne Win came, he erased minority of the ethnics from their list. This minority today disappear. You can't see these people, but their generation is still alive. The same Rohingya, they can't call Rohingya. Burmese government, as a government, they can't use our name. It's very shame. It's very shame. In Australia, okay, they hear many people from around the world. Most of the people are refugees here. You can use your name, okay, you can use your ethnicity name. Why my name, registered name, is not Mohammed Rauf in Burma? My registered name is Maung Maung Chit. That is in Burmese. When I left Burma, 1984, I used my name as Mohammed Rauf. Since then, I do my best for my activism for Rohingya rights, because I understand if I do not raise for my rights, for our people, we Rohingya will lose our rights in Burma and around the world. No one will know who is Rohingya. No one will know the Arkan. In front of you, here are a few people, I believe. Please, can you raise any Rohingya? Can you raise your hand? Can you raise your hand? You can see the Rohingya. They are studying university here in Australia. We don't have our right to study in Burma. They can use their name. Australian government giving all the benefit and all the facility, medical treatment, education, everything. Why we come here? If we can live in Burma, we're not supposed to come except just for a visit or maybe for studying. Many people, majority of our people came by boat. Why they came by boat? They suffer. They are not getting their rights. Even for their living, they can't get money. They can't get job. They can't get education. So that is the reason they left home. Okay? Many times it happened, genocide in Burma is still happening. You don't know what is happening in Burma. If Burmese government is honest, why not allowing UN or international reporter to come in? This is very simple to understand, everyone. No international reporter leaving or their office in Arakan state, or you can say today Rakhine state. No international reporter there. No one can get the information sharing with the international level. Why? Because they want to hide. They want to hide. They are doing genocide. Our expectation may be 600,000 or 700,000 of people still in Arakan state. But a day, we were a majority of the ethnic Rohingya in Arakan state. At that time, Rakhine were a minority. Today they become majority. We become minority in our state. You see, this because of genocide. A few days back, you may have read the news about the International Court of Justice. All relevant paper from Burmese government all rejected. All rejected. Okay? I hope another court session will be continued. They have been accepted our papers, our court papers. Definitely, very soon you will hear Burmese government will be punished. Sorry, I cut the word. Suffering people, not only Rohingya, I want to say, Rakhine, even Rakhine, Burmese, even their government. Okay? You can see many of Burmese here. I mean Burmese ethnicity, not Burmese national, I mean. Okay, Shan, Kachin, Karen, many ethnics. Why they left Burma? Many big refugee camp with the Thailand and Burma and Thailand border. Some are registered, some are unregistered. Okay, they are really suffering. If Thailand government not helping them, I can't say what their life will be. Today, Bangladesh government helping us, Malaysian government, Indonesian government, European government, Western countries, America. Mr. Biden leading our case now. I really appreciate Mr. Biden. Okay, so I hope this problem can be solved soon. Because of the matter is the genocide. Genocide can't be accepted that today, 21st century, any parts of the world. We need to fight. We need to fight for everyone's rights. We are human. One human should allow to others to live, to say, for his freedom, for their freedom. If we are hiding or keep shying to say for the rights, a day it will be with you, definitely. Anybody quiet, anybody hiding others' right, definitely you have to suffer. So please support for the Rohingya right, not only for the Rohingya right. There are many ethnics in Burma who are losing their rights. We need multicultural democracy in Burma. We were supporting to Suu Kyi, but a few years back, after coming to Australia, I have a live interview with ABC television. I spoke there. Suu Kyi was not doing right things. Even at that time, I believe, even Australian government didn't notice what is happening, what is doing, what is the reality with the Suu Kyi. But today, again, she is in the jail. Why? Recently, she was supporting to the military. Today, she became opposed to the military. Because not only that, she is racist. She loves only Burmese. She doesn't love any ethnics. That already proved. That is why many of the people say Suu Kyi is our mother, or say no, Suu Kyi she got very good chance. Suu Kyi, she attended International Court of Justice. For what? To protect the military.
Okay, Mom, I think there's a lot of very good points there, but the audience, I think, is quite diverse, so not everyone will get all the nuance of it.
Thank you.
So just to simplify some of the key points you've made, Myanmar is going through effectively a serious civil war since the coup last year. And I think Mohammed did raise a few points that even during this alleged kind of democratic transition, the party then in power, National League for Democracy, under de facto leadership of Aung San Suu Kyi, were certainly not friends of the Rohingya, and I think that's all fair points. And Aung San Suu Kyi was in The Hague effectively defending the action of the Myanmar state against the people of Rohingya. So there is current international cases going on with genocidal allegations against the Myanmar state. But before we get into, I do want to save some time for our audience questions. I want to now turn to Paween very quickly. Really decorated 30-year veteran of the Royal Thai Police. I mean, I think anyone who spent any amount of time in Thailand would quickly realize, and it was pointed out in the documentary, that most people don't take the Thai police seriously. They're one of the most corrupt institutions in Thailand, including the military. Of course, especially those who follow Thailand, we recently heard about Joe Ferrari and his 100 cars, a million baht mentions, and all this stuff. So how, given that you were so close to that system, how do you expect the Thai police or the public administrations in Thailand to reform itself to address all the issues that you've mentioned, to really try to combat against human trafficking, not just with the Rohingya community, but we know loads of other migrants and foreigners and victims of human trafficking are abused every day, not just in Thailand, but in Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, and really throughout the world, even here into Australia. How can the Thai state do better, and what do you think the international community, including Australia, could do?
I'm so sorry, it is too hard to explain in English, so I would like to speak in Thai. ในขณะนี้ที่ประเทศไทยไม่ว่าจะเป็นรัฐบาลหรือบุคคลที่มีอำนาจในประเทศไทยไม่คิดที่จะแก้ปัญหาของประเทศแต่มีสิ่งเดียวที่เขาคิดก็คือการคิดที่จะกำจัดคนที่คิดแก้ปัญหาให้กับประเทศ
As of now, Thailand's authority has no intention to solve the problems, but instead they would like to get rid of the people that try to solve the problems.
และที่สำคัญที่สุดเลยไม่ว่าจะเป็นข้าราชการเกือบจะทั้งหมดรวมทั้งองค์กรอิสระต่างๆต่างก็มุ่งรับใช้รัฐบาลและสิ่งที่ไม่ถูกต้องชอบธรรมทั้งนี้ก็เพื่อผลประโยชน์ของตัวเองและพวกพ้องโดยที่ไม่สนใจประชากรทั้งประเทศเกือบ70 ล้านคน
Most importantly, government officers and the independent organizations are focusing on serving the government regardless of morality to supply their own greeds and deeds. And they do not care about the well-being and the livelihood of the people of Thailand.
ในประเทศไทยคุณสามารถที่จะพูดได้ทุกสิ่งทุกอย่างยกเว้นความจริง
In Thailand, you can talk about anything except the truth.
ใครนำความจริงที่เป็นผลเสียต่อรัฐบาลหรือทหารคุณจะต้องถูกกำจัด
If you bring out the truth that would bring the that would be against the government and the military, you will be get rid of.
ในฐานะที่ผมเคยเป็นตำรวจมาก่อนคำถามที่ว่าผมจะทำยังไงกับสิ่งเหล่านี้
As a former police officer, for the question that what would I do to solve this problem?
ณ เวลานี้ผมไม่มีตำแหน่งหน้าที่ผมไม่มีอำนาจอะไรทั้งสิ้น
As of now, I hold no position. I have no power to do anything.
แต่ผมมีประสบการณ์ในการทำงานให้กับประเทศมานานและขณะเดียวกันผมมีปากที่จะพูดในประเทศที่มีเสรีภาพ
But I have experience serving the country for such a long time, and I have my voice in a country that allowed me to speak.
ดังนั้นสิ่งที่ผมจะสามารถทำได้ณขณะนี้และตลอดไปก็คือนำความจริงที่เกิดขึ้นในประเทศไทยมาเปิดเผยให้กับประชาคมโลกได้รับรู้
Therefore, what I can do now and forever is to bring out the truth about Thailand to the world community.
และเรียกร้องให้บรรดาสื่อมวลชนทุกแขนงทั่วโลกให้รับทราบรับรู้ความจริงและรายงานสิ่งเหล่านี้ไปยังประชาคมโลก
And I would beg the media to report what's happening in Thailand to the world community.
ผมเชื่อเหลือเกินว่าสื่อในประเทศไทยไม่กล้าที่จะนำเสนอความจริงด้วยตนเองจนกว่าสื่อต่างประเทศจะนำเสนอ
I genuinely believe that the Thai media are not courageous enough to report what's happening in Thailand by themselves unless the international media would act for them.
ดังนั้นผมจึงมีความกระหายที่อยากจะพูดกับสื่อมวลชนทั่วโลก
So, I would like to talk to the international media.
สิ่งที่จะพูดไม่ใช่การประดิษฐ์คำพูดที่สวยหรูแต่มันมาจากความจริงที่ผมพบเจอกับตนเอง
What I would like to talk about is not made up words to make it all sugarcoating, but what actually happened that I have experienced.
เมื่อสิ่งต่างๆความจริงปรากฏไปสู่ประชาคมโลกแล้ว ความจริงจะต้องช่วยกดดันให้ประเทศต่างๆมีบทบาทเป็นอย่างยิ่งในการไม่สนับสนุนรัฐบาลไทยที่มาจากความไม่ชอบธรรม
So when the truth is out there, the truth itself will force the Thai government to tackle the problems and to get rid of all the injustices.
วันนี้เป็นวันที่สำคัญวันหนึ่งที่ผมได้มีโอกาสมาร่วมกับประชาคมย่อยๆกลุ่มนี้
Today is one of the most important days that I get to engage with this community.
และเป้าหมายที่จะต้องดำเนินการต่อไปนั้นยังต้องมีเรื่องที่จะต้องทำอีกมาก
And there will be a lot more to do for my next goals.
และผมเชื่อว่าทุกท่านที่ติดตามผมสนับสนุนผมจะร่วมไปกับผมด้วย
And I believe that everybody who has been following me would follow me and would support me on this issue.
และกิจกรรมในวันนี้เป็นกิจกรรมหนึ่งที่ผมเห็นว่าเป็นเรื่องที่สำคัญเป็นอย่างยิ่งที่ก่อให้เกิดวันนี้ขึ้นมาได้ผมต้องขอบคุณทุกฝ่ายที่ร่วมดำเนินการในวันนี้นั่นคือสิ่งที่ผมต้องการจะทำขอบคุณมากครับ
And for this event today, I see that it's one of the most significant events to help out that ever happened, to help out this, to bring out the truth. So I would like to thank everybody involved in organizing this event today.
So I know we were supposed to end at 8 already, a few minutes past 8, and we didn't really have much time to discuss. So I was going to ask one kind of broad question, and I'll start with Catherine. Really, because even in Australian context, right? There's been a lot of discussion about refugee policies in this country. It's been, let's be honest, both the major parties, ALP and the Liberal Party, don't have much difference when it comes about the issue against human trafficking and the refugee policy here. So I just want to start with Catherine, especially given your expertise. What do you think of Australia's policy on refugees? Is it actually addressing the issue of human trafficking, or is it actually making the issues of human trafficking even worse?
Thanks for that question. I thought about that very question at the time the bodies were discovered in the jungle on the Thai-Burma border, because the horror of what was revealed there, the torture, the bodies, showed that the Australian government's policy, which at the time was to turn back boats, no more boat arrivals in Australia, Australian citizens will never again have to look at people drowning in Australian waters, had just pushed a problem that still existed somewhere else. So it's a short answer that no, I don't think Australia's refugee policies address the underlying issues to do with human trafficking. Australia's been asleep at the wheel in relation to its own region. When the war in Syria took place, we lifted our humanitarian visa cap and we welcomed refugees from Syria. And now with Ukraine, former Prime Minister Scott Morrison said, I'll put the Ukrainian asylum seekers at the top of the pile. And in our own region, there are people sitting in a refugee camp. There are children being born into a second generation of living in a refugee camp whose suffering is every bit as great as that in other parts of the world. And yet we pay our own region not the attention that we absolutely should if we think we're a part of it.
Thanks, Catherine. Muhammad, maybe just very briefly, if you can share your thoughts on Australian refugee policy and what Australia could do to help the people of Rohingya and other places seeking a safe place.
Thank you. At present, now, new government, Mr. Albanese, are really expecting Australia, European government, and US, because at this time they are giving a special focus to finalize this matter, because there is two matters. One is genocide with the Rohingya, another is democracy in Burma. So these two topics become very important for Burma. So I hope, since we have been expecting a multicultural country in Burma, since we are here, you see how we are happy to see to all different country and different ethnics who are coming here to see and to listen. I really appreciate you here. I'm really happy to see you here because you are giving time. So if Australian government giving a special focus, coordinating with the other Asian countries, you know the story of the ASEAN countries, because they have, some have political interest, some have business interest because they are investing a lot of money. So there are a lot of, the problems themselves with the government and, the government bodies. So in this case, we are expecting Australian government, Mr. Albanese, he can do a good job coordinating with the European and the American government, along with the ASEAN countries. I hope we need a democracy, a multicultural democracy in Burma. We need this genocide problem with Rohingya people, and all the refugees must go back to Burma, Arakan state, with their own right and dignity. Because, I left Burma in 1984. Majority of my life out of Burma. Why? If I was in Burma, I can be an officer, I can be a businessman, I can be a teacher, whatever my capacity, similar to those other people. Okay, now young generation alone in refugee camp, hundreds of thousands, they don't know where is their mother, where is their brother, how they left the country. Nothing left in Arakan state. So we need to go back, all refugees need to go back to Burma and must have their right. We need to build our country. We need to pass from genocide. Burmese government should get the punishment. Nowhere should be genocide around the world.
Thank you, Mark.
We finish it. Thank you.
Because I think that's all very valid points. I remember in the 1990s, there were a lot of these magazines, right, where you see refugees go home and actually say they would if they could. So I think that's a very valid point that, and Catherine's addressed this, a lot of refugees they're leaving not because they have a choice if they want to, but because they're forced in that position. So the root of it is if we can address these problems at the root, whether it's development, peace, and democracy in Myanmar or elsewhere, then perhaps we won't have this issue of human trafficking. So I think that's a valid point. But again, I want to have some time for the public. So just very quickly, Paween, obviously you're welcome here with your, well, not welcome, the Australian government really helped you with your settling here. What can Australia do to help all these other people who haven't have the conditions that you are offered? Is there more the Australian government can do?
In my opinion, easy to speak in Thai. วันที่ผมเดินทางมาออสเตรเลียเป็นวันที่ลำบากที่สุดในชีวิตครั้งหนึ่งผมได้สูญเสียทุกสิ่งทุกอย่างในชีวิตไม่ว่าจะเป็นหน้าที่การงานไม่มีครอบครัวอยู่เพียงลำพังและขณะนี้ผมอยู่ลำพังมานานกว่า6 ปีจะเข้าปีที่7ผมก็ยังอยู่คนเดียว
On the first day that I arrived in Australia was one of the most suffering day in my life. I lost everything in my life. I lost my job. I lost my family. I've been living alone for almost 7 years.
ผมไม่ทราบ
นโยบายผู้ลี้ภัยของประเทศออสเตรเลียในขณะนั้น
I wasn't aware of the refugee policy of Australia at that time.
ผมรู้ว่าทำยังไงถึงจะรักษาชีวิตของผมได้ให้ปลอดภัยในเวลานั้น
I only knew what I had to do to keep myself alive and safe.
ในเวลานั้นใครแนะนำอย่างไรก็ปฏิบัติตามคนที่แนะนำ
At that time, whatever advice I was given, I followed.
และก็คิดว่าประเทศออสเตรเลียน่าจะเป็นประเทศที่ให้ความปลอดภัยกับผมได้
And I thought that Australia would be the country that could provide me safety.
จากประสบการณ์ของผมการผมมาแสวงหาความปลอดภัยในประเทศเนี่ยไม่ง่ายเลยลำบากมาก
From my experience, seeking safety in this country is not easy. It has been of much struggle.
นี่ผมพูดจากใจของผมนะลำบากขนาดนี้บางทีกลับไปใหม่ผมอาจจะไม่มาก็ได้
Speaking from the bottom of my heart, from the experience from this struggle, if I could turn back time, I might not have come here.
แต่ในความลำบากนั้นด้วยการพิจารณาของทางการของออสเตรเลียมีขั้นมีตอนค่อนข้างยากแต่ก็สมเหตุสมผล
From that struggling and suffering, because of all the procedures of the Australian government, they were complicated but reasonable.
เป็นไปไม่ได้ที่รัฐบาลออสเตรเลียหรือทางการออสเตรเลียจะไม่ตรวจสอบผม
Of course, it's impossible for the Australian government to not investigate my background.
แต่ผมมีความมั่นใจสิ่งที่ผมมอบให้กับทางการออสเตรเลียคือความจริงเท่านั้น
But I was confident that everything I gave to the Australian government is the truth.
และที่สุดวันเวลาที่ผ่านไปก็ทำให้ผมได้รับสถานะเป็นผู้ลี้ภัย
And eventually, after many days have passed, a lot of time have passed, I have received my refugee status.
แล้วก็เริ่มได้สิทธิต่างๆใกล้เคียงกับคนออสเตรเลียทั่วไป
And I have received all the benefits almost at the same level as normal Australian citizen.
ผมพยายามที่จะยืนอยู่บนขาตัวเองให้ได้
I'm trying to stand on my own feet.
ที่จะฝึกฝนภาษาอังกฤษให้ได้
And I'm trying to improve my English.
ผมเจอเอมอสครั้งแรกผมพูดภาษาอังกฤษไม่ได้
The first time I met Amos, I could not speak English.
เอมอสชักชวนให้ผมพูดผมไม่กล้าผมอาย
Amos was trying to help me speak English, but I was shy, I couldn't speak English.
ทุกวันนี้ผมก็ยังพูดได้ไม่ดี
Even now, I still could not speak English well.
ผมอายเวลาผมพูดไม่ชัด
I was embarrassed when I'm speaking that was not clearly.
นั่นคือปัญหาของผม
That's my problem.
แต่ผมคิดว่าไม่ใช่ปัญหาของพวกท่าน
But I don't think that's your problem.
สิ่งที่ผมได้รับในขณะนี้จากทางการออสเตรเลียสิทธิต่างๆนั้นทำให้สามารถยืนอยู่ตัวเองบนขาตัวเองได้ผมมีงานทำและผมภูมิใจมากในวันนี้ผมไม่ต้องอาศัยเงินเซ็นเตอร์ลิงและจ่ายภาษีให้กับรัฐบาลออสเตรเลียนั่นดีกว่าครับ
What I have been receiving from the Australian government had helped me stand on my own feet, and I'm proud now that I do not need help from the Centrelink and that I can pay tax.
เมื่ออาทิตย์ที่แล้วผมมีข่าวดีผมได้เสียภาษีและทำการคืนภาษีรัฐบาลออสเตรเลียใจดีคืนภาษีให้ผม 1,000 เหรียญ
Last week I got good news. I have received my tax return and it was almost $1,000. So thanks.
So we're 15 minutes running down schedule. I think we probably have a couple of questions in the public. If panelists are happy to do that. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll identify you. Please just, if you could, identify yourself and tell us if you would be happy to be photographed or not. Yes, yes. I think there was a question there with the lady in the mask.
So hi, this question is directed to Professor Renshaw. You gave an excellent background on Southeast Asian countries and their human trafficking. I would like to ask, you mentioned the previous attempts to address these issues, some by the UN. What do you think will actually bring a step forward to these countries? What do you think we can do as with our refugee policies on asylum seekers? And how can we possibly, how can Australia have solutions to these issues, or how can we at least help in some way?
It's a good question. So Australia needs to take a long-term view of engagement with the region, not just responding when there's a crisis. So Sri Lanka falls apart, so we rush over to Sri Lanka and make sure that the Sri Lanka government's not going to let Sri Lankans get onto boats that could end up on Australian shores. We need to have a view of engagement with the region that means serious economic and financial long-term support for countries. Australia passed a Modern Slavery Act in 2018, and that was meant to be exactly what you're talking about, a big step forward for Australia. It required Australian companies, if they have a turnover of $100 million, to publish a report each year that affirms that they've checked all of their supply chains and can confirm that there's no slavery or human trafficking involved in any component of the supply chain. So that's been on foot for, getting on for 4 years, and it's widely regarded as a joke. So companies are not taking their responsibilities under the Modern Slavery Act seriously. So the new government promised that it would toughen up Australia's Modern Slavery Act, that it would give it some teeth, that would force companies to do what they're meant to, and that the Australian government would appoint a slavery commissioner. And that would be a very good thing, because they would have to answer to the Attorney General about exactly what Australia is doing. So that's sort of in relation to trafficking. In relation to refugee and Australia's refugee policy, that's far more difficult. You'd be aware that, as Roger said, both sides of politics in this country have said that they will commit to turning back boats, they'll commit to offshore processing, and the sort of cruelty, there's no other word for it, UN has called it torture, that occurs in offshore processing as well. So the treatment of people who seek asylum in Australia is something that has been a source of continuous shame for Australians, and there is a relationship between what we do here and what happens in places like on the Thai-Burma border.
Can I just add that what Australia's doing is actually breaking international law, and being picked up on that, and that it's actually more costly running these offshore detention centers than if Australia actually followed international law. So we're actually spending more money than if we just follow law. I think there's a question over there.
I need to help with these names. I have the same problems, their names, all of them names, language problems. I have to say them. Today is you're speaking. Sorry I apologize. Your names, I can't see you. Like you speaking times, my feelings like it's my father speaking. I'm from Burma, Rohingya, Arakan State. 7 kids mother. I arrived in Thailand 7 days with my 4 kids. Your documentary This is the my journey. I don't have any document to proofs. I have only my voice. I give it to interview 4 times. Only my voice. I don't have any document. Because my journey, I don't have carry out my phones. I don't know my journey. This true documentary. Thank you for your sharing and what you started. My past. My father is Burma Rohingya police officer. I'm not the bones this time. And my father, who is the state, your state, you lose everything. You didn't lose. Your feelings like is no have power. Do you have actual power? I feel. Because you state, everything is true. This is my message, my big feedback for you, everything. I can't control my emotion. I have to say something. This reason my hands up. Everyone, I have one question. Where is your family? They are safe? Because I know your experience and my little experience, who has stayed there for true, they're not very safe. They're not safe. Their family is behind unsafe with feeling. I understand 100% your feelings. Thank you so much. What you do it. You are actual models. We have to stay there for true. We don't lose. We feeling that we have to lose there for power. We don't need the power. We have to true. We take the true step. We need. Thank you so much. You're all hard work. Everything who supports you, I have to explain this one. Who saved you in Australia? I am safe. This reason I have to say some things. You safe. You show your documentary. Thank you. This country make that we safe. Thank you so much.
For that heartfelt comment, is there any other questions? There's one in the back there.
Okay. I will be using Thai. Please translate. Thank you. อย่างแรกครับผมบอกคุณปวีณกันเลยว่าผมพยายามจะให้ความหวังเนาะผมเป็นสื่อทำงานสื่อสารในไทยนะครับตอนนี้ผมย้ายมาอยู่ชั่วคราวที่นี่ผมมาที่นี่เพื่อเจอคุณปวีณก็จะคิดว่าถ้าอยากให้คนไทยเล่าเรื่องของคนไทยด้วยกันเองแล้วมันกระทบทั้งโลกเนี่ยผมอยู่ตรงนี้นะครับมีอย่างแรก
I would like to say that I don't want to give you hope, but I am a journalist in Thailand, and now I came here to Australia, and I came here to meet you, and I promise you bring your story to the world. I'm here to help you.
If you want to. คำถามสั้นๆนะครับก็คือถ้าคนที่ควรจะช่วยโปรโมท human rights ของเราเนี่ย by duty ด้วยหน้าที่เขา against มันเราจะทำยังไงได้บ้างเพื่อให้มันมีความหวังมากขึ้นเพื่อจะเปลี่ยนเรื่องแบบนี้ครับถามทุกท่านครับขอบคุณครับ
Okay, long story short, the question to all panelists. So, what should we do when the people that have the duty to promote and protect the human rights, but what they do is the opposite? So, what can we do to solve this problem?
That is the question of the whole world, I think. And when I was watching Paween's video, I thought of that line by Solzhenitsyn, the line between good and evil, it runs down the middle of every single human heart. So for all of the international law and the Modern Slavery Act and this and that, nothing will change unless people are as brave as Paween is. And I don't think there's any rule that you can put in place to make people have that sort of courage. So I think we just have to wait until heroes come along.
Okay. So I am a scholar of Thai media, popular culture in particular. I focus on queer representation. Some of you may have heard of something called CDSY. That's what I research. So it is a strange privilege to be here in a room with such amazing activists and scholars committed to human rights. I, too, have been watching what has been occurring in Thailand, what has been happening in Thailand, as I connect with youths who celebrate new forms of media, new forms of positive representation, but who are also pushing for reform, pushing for change. And that's what I really feel today at the end of tonight's session. Kun Paween's journey and courage is presaging a new change. To see these discussions happening, for us to talk about and reflect upon corruption at the very top, whether that be going to the top of parliament, to the top of the military, or to the top of an institution that I cannot formally name, but we all know about whom I'm speaking. This is change. And that's what really I feel most privileged about today. And I also wish to thank each and every one of you who has asked questions or shared your emotional stories, who have called for a better world. And that's what I'm here for. And I think that's the role of academia, and it's certainly the role of our department as both a research and teaching institution, is to bring about change, positive change in the world. So that's what I would like to call upon all of us here gathered to move forward as we finish tonight. To take the positive energy that is generated in this room, to take inspiration from the courage of activists and whistleblowers such as Kun Paween, such as Mr. Muhammad Rauf, and academics such as Catherine, such as Roger and myself in our small way, and of course the brilliant work of my colleague Dr. Chavalin Svetanant and Dr. Aim Simpeng at University of Sydney. And I do want to share an especially warm thank you to Chavalin, who I'm sure many of you have noticed has been running around tonight, and even now isn't listening perhaps to the fact that we're about to thank her for all her hard work. This night has really been thanks to Chavalin's tireless effort. I remember when she reached out to me saying, have you heard about this guy, this fantastic man down in Melbourne, Paween Pongsirin? I want to do something to help him. And this is what led to tonight's event. So I would like to thank Chavalin, and I think we should all... And now, as is my final privilege of the night, a little bit of housekeeping, because that's what I do. I'm sure many of you have noticed on the screen 2 QR codes circulating, the first of which is to support the Blue Heart campaign, because this event is about human trafficking. We've heard emotive stories and seen quite, I guess, confronting images about the horrors of human trafficking and the horrors facing vulnerable communities in Southeast Asia, such as the Rohingya, as well as many more. I would urge you all to, if you can, provide some support to this particular charity, because as we move forward into a world that is looking more and more unstable, unfortunately, I think that charities such as Blue Heart Campaign are doing good work, and if we can support them, I would urge you to do so. My second piece of housekeeping relates to a survey. Now, everyone who is registered through Eventbrite will receive a link to this survey, but you can also access it through the QR code. Now, unfortunately, we will not have an opportunity for members of the audience to meet and greet with our guests, including Kun Paween. So if you would like to leave a message to Kun Paween or Mr. Mohammed, please access this survey and we will take your message and that message will be given to our guests, okay? As I said, unfortunately we won't have a meet and greet, but this is a way for you to connect and reach out and speak to these gentlemen. So, I was saying don't use your phones, but if you'd like to use your phones, now is okay, I'm not going to kick anyone out. And I would like to thank you all for your support today.